Hi, today we're going to take a look at a very interesting lens. This is the KERLEE 35mm f1.2 lens. This lens was designed by DZoptics in China, and it is a full-frame lens. This version specifically is designed for Nikon, and we're going to take a look at its performance and features. So let's take a look. Just before Photokina 2016, we got a package in the mail with an interesting surprise inside. A super fast 35mm lens made by a relatively unknown Chinese manufacturer called DZoptics. After several weeks of using this lens, here are our thoughts. There are plenty of 35mm lenses around for DSLR cameras from a variety of manufacturers, so a new lens needs to stand out, and the KERLEE, we hope we are pronouncing this correctly, is certainly unique with its full frame coverage and f1.2 aperture. So let's take a look at the lens. The KERLEE is very well made and has a relatively nice design, which is also pretty attractive. To us, it's somewhat reminiscent of the older classic Zeiss lenses, and it is probably not a coincidence. The lens is actually pretty compact at under 100mm or 4 inches, and it's fairly thin. Since it has quite a bit of glass and made out of metal, it has some weight to it, and it tips the scale at just under 700 grams or 1.5 pounds. The lens has two rings, a thin aperture ring and a thicker focus ring. The aperture ring, which is closer to the camera and can move with clicks, or if you change a tiny switch, can turn smoothly for video work. Both rings are well made with good friction, and the focus ring has a long throw of about 180 degrees. The lens comes with a metal hood with some black fabric inside. Size. Putting the hood upside down for storage was kind of baffling, and the hood kept falling off until we talked to DZoptics, who suggested that we push it down a bit more, which fixed the issue. We still think that the company needs to work on the hood mechanism a bit more to make it easier for use. The lens has a rather large, for a 35mm lens, front element with a diameter of 72mm. Keep this in mind when you think of getting a filter for this lens. Before we talk about optical performance, a word about focusing with this lens. Manual focus on DSLR cameras is never easy, unless of course you're working on a tripod with live view and magnification on, which is what we have done most of the time, and of course you do need to know what you're doing. This lens is fully manual and has no communication with the camera body, so no EXIF, no aperture information, etc. Just keep this in mind. Testing sharpness on a super fast lens like this is extremely difficult. We had to run our tests 3 times before we felt we got the correct results. These tests were done on our D7100 after we returned the D500, and sadly the D810, which we hoped to use for this test, was not available for us. We compared our lens to the compact Nikon 35mm f1.8 DX lens. Wide open, the KERLEE is sharp in the center and surprisingly sharp in the corners for such a fast lens. Compared to the Nikon at f1.8, the KERLEE seems a bit less sharp in the center, but significantly sharper in the corners, and this continues as you close down the shutter as well. We do know that other reviewers did encounter some chromatic aberration with this lens. We didn't, and trust us, we tried, but it just might be our luck. Just like with chromatic aberration, we didn't really encounter too much flare with this lens, although others have mentioned that they ran into it. We do need to try a little bit more against bright sunlight and see what happens. In terms of vignette, this isn't really a fair test since we have done this on a crop sensor camera, but you can still see the results on the screen. In terms of barrel distortion, from our testing, the KERLEE has little to no barrel distortion at all. In terms of bokeh, just like with the Sigma 50-100mm f1.8 that we have tested here recently, wide open, the bokeh shape isn't round, but if you close it down a little bit, the light sources become rounder. The background blur of this lens looked to us very nice indeed, which is what this lens is all about. So let's try and conclude. The KERLEE is an interesting and quite an ambitious first DSLR product for DZoptics. It is well built with good design, not too big, and we even dare say aesthetically pleasing. In terms of performance, DZoptics seems to have done a pretty good job. Wide open, it is quite sharp in the center and surprisingly sharp in the corners, at least on our D7100. Although our inexpensive Nikon 35mm f1.8 DX lens seems a bit sharper in the center, all around the Kerlee did perform significantly better. So is it worth $700? Well, that's a hard question. If you want a very fast lens and you understand the limitations of manual focus, especially with such a fast lens, this is possibly one of the fastest 35mm lenses around, and it might serve you well for both stills and video work. So this was our look at the Kerlee 35mm f1.2. You can read the full review on lensvid.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. See you next time.